So clearly one of the most highly recognized meddling owners in the world of sports has to go to James Dolan. I know if there was some sort of award for being a meddling owner, James Dolan would certainly be a finalist every year. But at this point, I want to give the president of the New York Knicks, Leon Rose, a little bit of credit here for apparently finding a way to get this New York Knicks organization once again to, if you will, be thriving. On today's NBA Rundown, we are going to talk about James Dolan. We're going to talk about the New York Knicks. We're going to talk about how they've actually turned things around in New York, despite the fact that they have, if you will, one of the most impressive meddling owners in the world of sports. Look, when I think of James Dolan, I always think of that old man who used to say on the Scooby-Doo cartoon shows, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those darn kids. That is exactly who James Dolan has been through the years as the owner of the New York Knicks. Now, of course, this has all been well documented over the years, how his meddling has actually led to the New York Knicks not actually progressing and thriving in the NBA. But something changed about 5 years ago when James Dolan and the New York Knicks organization made the absolute correct choice in hiring Tom Thibodeau to actually be their head coach. Now, we're going to get into the makeup of this roster. We're going to talk a little bit about how far this particular roster can go this year in the Eastern Conference as well. But I think it is important to note that good coaching absolutely matters in sports. And in the NBA, a Tom Thibodeau type character is probably the right kind of coach for a James Dolan to have, if you will, interaction with. Tom Thibodeau is the very definition of a head coach with tough skin. Now, when the New York Knicks made the move during the offseason in the middle of the night to trade for one Karl Anthony Towns and shipped out Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, I thought, here we go again. It is going to be another rocky road for the New York Knicks in the coming years. But the opposite has actually happened, and that credit certainly needs to go to Leon Rose, who has done a fantastic job reshaping the roster with an owner that, quite frankly, has his finger on the trigger constantly. Now, one of the best parts about James Dolan over the last 5 or 6 years is a lot of his attention was put someplace else. Like, as a meddling owner, he was able to shift some of that attention to the new sphere in Las Vegas, which, if you haven't had a chance to see it yet in person, all I can say is it is absolutely fabulous. Now, this particular New York Knicks team, though, when you look at this roster and you see that they have Jalen Brunson, who we all know took a discount to remain with the New York Knicks over the coming years. The idea of bringing Jalen Brunson in, as we know at this point, has turned out to be absolutely a goldmine for this New York Knicks organization. So what you have now is two players actually averaging between 25 and 26 points a game with Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson. Then throw in Mikal Bridges, who, knock on wood, never gets injured and is always a consistent player. You got OG on this roster, and I absolutely love the heart that Josh Hart absolutely brings to this New York Knicks team. Now, we could run down the rest of the roster, and there are some interesting other components to this roster. I think ultimately, for this New York Knicks team to really go deep this year in the Eastern Conference, two things probably would have to happen. One is that the New York Knicks would actually have to remain healthy. No major injuries, no major missed time by any of the major players in the starting roster of this New York Knicks team, I think is certainly one of them. And then I think the other thing that the Knicks would like to actually go out and do is bring in another Josh Hartenstein type player back to this team. Now, I'm not saying they can go get him, but they do need a little bit more beef up front with this basketball team at this point. I also think the loss of Dante DiVincenzo is something that they haven't quite been able to figure out how to replace yet, at least coming off of the bench. But when you look at the makeup of the highly competitive Eastern Conference, and a lot of times we hear people talking about how competitive the Western Conference is. Look, I'm here to tell you that the National Basketball Association at this point as a whole is extraordinarily competitive. It just is. But when you look at the entire makeup of the Eastern Conference, currently the Detroit Pistons, who did beat the Knicks last night at Madison Square Garden, are currently in the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference with a record of 21-19. Below them is the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers and the Chicago Bulls. Now, I don't think that the Chicago Bulls will be there at the end of the year. I'm assuming that the Bulls will actually make some trades and slide back in the standings. I expect the 76ers, who the New York Knicks actually play tomorrow night in Philadelphia, to be a team that makes a serious move towards a playoff spot. Things are still extraordinarily competitive in the Eastern Conference. The Boston Celtics have proven over the last couple weeks that they are absolutely beatable. Look, there is a way to beat the Celtics. Just take a look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, how the Cavaliers have actually been playing. Now, from a depth perspective, it is hard to argue that the New York Knicks currently have a better roster than the Boston Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers. But anything can happen in a 7-game series. And remember what I said about how good coaching absolutely matters. Look, Tom Thibodeau is 5 years into his James Dolan journey at this point. And I think it's absolutely safe to say that if they got him one or two other key pieces, this New York Knicks team could certainly find a way to actually win the Eastern Conference this year. Now, this is all being done despite the meddling of one James Dolan. And what you get when you have a strong coach like a Tom Thibodeau, you have somebody like Leon Rose, who's actually running the Knicks organization, who is also able to stand up to Dolan and also able to still make good moves despite the input that Dolan actually still has on this New York Knicks team. What they have right now is a core nucleus in the executive management component of the New York Knicks organization, which I would include Tom Thibodeau in, that are actually able to handle a meddling owner like James Dolan. All right, I'd love to know what your thoughts and opinions are. Please go ahead and drop them in. For the NBA Rundown, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate